The original Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, when it released back in 2020, was my favorite game of that year. 7 has had a big impact on my life and just honestly how I enjoy the medium of storytelling as well as RPGs in general, to such an extent that I almost feel like this game has helped to shape the person that I am today. So needless to say, I've been really looking forward to and excited about what we might be getting in part 2 of this grand epic remake that Square has been undertaking these past few years. And that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which falls right after the events of Midgar and is where the game truly is meant to open up into a grand, huge world. There's been a lot of new details that have come out about the game, as well as a number of demos that were playable over at the Tokyo Game Show that I'd like to take a moment to talk to you guys about and break down a bit. Because from everything I've seen and everything I've read and everything that I've watched of this new gameplay, as well as all the interesting nuances in the story, I'm convinced that this game is going to be something truly special. One that's going to make the original Final Fantasy VII Remake seem vastly inferior by comparison. Which, to be fair, is exactly what a great sequel should do. So I'd like to share with you guys what we can expect from this next grand game, as well as some of my theories and ideas about a number of the new gameplay mechanics that the game introduces. First off, I will say I was not one of the lucky individuals who got a chance to play this. I was not at TGS, nor was I at the Square offices where some other content creators had a chance to play it. But I was fortunately given this 4K footage by Maximilian Dude, who was kind enough to share his footage with me that he recorded when he went to check it out himself. So that's going to be the footage you'll be seeing here. So I just want to give a huge thank you to him for that. If you're not following Max or haven't heard of him, I'll leave a link to his channel in the description, so make sure you go send him some love. He's a wonderful content creator and streamer, and I honestly can't recommend him enough. So the gameplay that was shown off at Tokyo Game Show that people were able to check out actually consisted of 2 different demos. The first one followed Cloud and Sephiroth in the early portions of the game, incurring a flashback from 5 years ago, as the two ascend Mount Nebel to investigate the goings-on in one of the Mako reactors, with an also younger Tifa as their guide. And then the second demo jumps back to the present day and hops a bit further into the game as Cloud and team head over to Junin Harbor, showing off a bit more of the exploration as you explore the area on your chocobos. In the flashback, the fight along Sephiroth ends with an epic fight against what was originally the Materia Keeper from Final Fantasy VII OG, which actually was not a fight that you had in the flashback in the original game, and was actually something you fought much later on in present day Cloud and team. So I don't know if that means we're not actually going to fight him again later, if they're just moving him here, because he even has a lot of the same moves, including the classic Trine move that was known to blow you the F up. But he seems to act as this game's guard scorpion, as he likely marks the final boss of the flashback sequence, at least potentially. Meanwhile, at the end of the Junin section, we also fought a boss that was in the original Final Fantasy VII, this crazy water monster snake thingy. And while Priscilla and the dolphin are actually back as well, they're actually not the ones we're saving this time. Hilariously enough, this appears to be the moment we first encounter Yuffie in the game, as we see her floating in a boat with her name as a question mark, which is funny because I think a lot of us predicted that Yuffie was actually going to come a bit earlier, like maybe after we hung out in Calm, because I think we sort of predicted that she'd be the one stealing all of our materia, and that's why we start the next game with not as much of our really good magic. But maybe not. Maybe we're not even going to use that plot device to potentially de-level and de-strengthen all of our group. It's a new game. Just go with it. But yeah, both the demos were very impressive. Demo 1 primarily focused on tutorials for how to fight in battles, and then the second demo was primarily focused on tutorials and how the exploration of the game would go. So let's focus first on the battle system and its changes in this game. One of the things I noticed almost right off the bat was that this game actually has an enemy detection system. In other words, enemies will actually slowly notice you as you get closer within their field of vision, which was not something that was in the original game. Before, in Remake, you just kind of got sort of close enough and then just a battle would trigger. You even get a first strike bonus if you actually end up sneaking up on the enemy before they see you. Cloud seems to control a lot like how we controlled in the original Final Fantasy VII Remake, with a few new changes. His Punisher mode, where he enters a crazy heavy stance, actually alters his square move, where instead of doing these big heavy strikes, he sort of flies himself back and forth in this crazy like wide slashing move that you can seemingly spam again and again. He also has quite a few moves that involve a new gameplay type called Synergy, which I'll get into in a moment. But for the most part, he's going to seem pretty familiar to anyone who played the last game. Now, the real star of this segment has got to be Sephiroth. simply for the fact that he was actually not a character that you were originally able to play in Final Fantasy VII OG. While you did fight alongside Sephiroth in that flashback segment, he was not controllable. He was all AI controlled. And he was also invincible. So it really wasn't like a whole lot to it. He just was like super buff, had all like the best magic. I remember him being about level 50 and was cool, but it was always a bummer that we never got a chance to be able to control or do anything with him in the game. And while I understand from a design perspective why they decided to do that, they wanted, Sephiroth to feel kind of like separate, like he's not truly part of the group. At least I think that's what their idea was in the original game. They've changed things up here, and now we have full control over Sephiroth and his crazy moves, and holy mother of God, is this mofo busted in this game. His attacks have huge, massive strikes because of the insane size of his mass immune. He's fast, deals insane critical hits, wields some of the most powerful spells even compared to Cloud, who only has a few like fire and lightning spells, while Sephiroth has like Faraga and Thundaga and Blizzaga. The gimmick to his battles seems to be that as he lands attacks with his square move, he gets new finishers on his triangle move, like Pierce or Sword Dance, which also fills up his limit break gauge even faster. He also gets a counter stance, which allows him to essentially parry any incoming attacks, but I don't really see this done super often in this footage. Mostly because the enemies just die so fast, especially when you're controlling Sephiroth. Another thing to note, and this is actually something to note for all the characters in this game, your dodge has been improved. It essentially has changed to what was originally the parry materia in Final Fantasy VII Remake. You might remember in the original game where when you dodge, you just kind of did like a little roll move that was only okay, but you were able to upgrade it to a much better, what was called parry dodge move that was different for each of the characters. Like Cloud would do like a little cartwheel flip, and then Tifa would do this cool sliding thing. Well, that's just now the universal move. Cloud's dodge has now been replaced with just that better parry flippity move. And similarly, Tifa's, when she dodges, she just does her little sliding thing, and it's done all the way across the board for everyone. Funny enough, Sephiroth's dodge move is simply a teleport. He literally will just teleport right to the enemy, or teleport away wherever he goes. Crazy busted. Allows him to not even have to worry about airborne enemies. So like when Trine is up in the ceiling, he'll just teleport straight up there and start whacking him. No enemy is out of reach for dear old daddy Sephiroth. The flashback sequences where they also introduce some of the most impactful gameplay changes to the battle system. And it's stuff that we saw in a lot of the promotional material and some of the stuff that got a lot of us the most hyped. And that is the synergy moves. They're actually separated into two categories: the synergy skills and the synergy abilities. Synergy skills are actually moves that don't use up any ATB or have any cost whatsoever. And they are unique based on who you're partied with in any given fight. So in the intro part here, we have Cloud and Sephiroth. If you're controlling Cloud and you use a synergy move, he gets the moves Void Shatter and Counterfire. With Void Shatter being this cool like charge up move, and Counterfire is some kind of counter ability. I think it's essentially like counters ranged attacks, if I was understanding it correctly. And if you're controlling Sephiroth, you instead get a move called Dual Dance, which basically just has Cloud attack literally at the exact same time that Sephiroth is, allowing you to lay on the pressure even more. And again, these moves cost you nothing. They're free. They essentially act as an extension now to what your characters can do. They're basically like the equivalent of regular attacks, which is fantastic, because the big sort of issue with the remake battle system, the original one, as fun as it was and as really enjoyable as it was, it did sort of limit your really cool moves to having to use ATB or some kind of resource like magic, you know? Like you couldn't do anything without spending something unless it was a regular basic attack or dodging. So being able to do stuff like this anytime you want and have it also be different based on your party composition leads to a lot of experimentation. In fact, this new system seems to also help to solve one of the biggest problems that the original remake battle system had, and that was aerial combat. Some of you might remember how fighting airborne enemies in the original Final Fantasy VII Remake was a pain in the ass, at least with certain characters. Characters like Cloud and Tifa were just kind of screwed. They just sort of would like hop in the air and get like a couple of hits off and then fall like a fucking ton of bricks back to the ground before they'd have to hop back in the air and do it again. And it made those sections where you were forced to use those characters a real pain in the butt to deal with and not very fun. But this game helps to fix that. When you're over in the Junin section and playing with your whole party, if you're controlling Tifa and have Cloud in your party, you can do a synergy skill called Soaring Flurry. where Cloud tosses Tifa into the air and at airborne enemies, allowing her to combo into them immediately. Similarly, if you're controlling Cloud with Red, you could do a synergy skill called Howling Smash, where Red will fire projectiles at Cloud and Cloud will knock them at the enemy, making it again easier to hit with ranged attacks, which in essence allows him to attack with ranged attacks whenever he wants. Cloud also has a similar move with Barret where he deflects the bullets at the enemy in a move called Bullet Batter. Other unique and interesting synergy skills are Aerith's bodyguard move, where for both Cloud and Tifa, she can call them over at a moment's notice to cover her, much like how the cover material used to work in the original game, and defend her from attacks. There's also Spellblade, where Cloud uses Aerith's magic to charge up his sword and unleash a really powerful strike. Or Heavenly Ascent, where Tifa uses a glyph by Aerith to launch herself in the air. Or Power Cleave, where both Cloud and Tifa smash down with an incredibly powerful, albeit shallow attack that deals insane stagger damage. The amount of variety is crazy. And now it means that when I fight these airborne enemies, I don't have to engage them in the same way that I did before. It gives me a lot more tools at my disposal that also don't end up having to cost me a bunch of ATB or MP. It's amazing. This is honestly a brilliant new gameplay addition that's gonna make the variety to combat so much more enjoyable. Now, the other synergy move that you get is called Synergy Abilities. And unlike synergy skills, these do cost something, but it's actually different from what you normally spend, at least in the previous game. And that is these little pips that appear right beneath your ATB and HP. These little pips form as you spend your ATB in fights. And once you filled it up 2 times, you can spend those pips to do synergistic abilities with your fellow party members that not only damage the enemy, but can also give buffs like increasing limit levels, granting unlimited MP, or even extending stagger duration. And these moves are usually like crazy cinematic, like Firework Blade, that has Cloud firing these massive blasts of Aerith's magic. Barret and Red get a synergy ability called Overfang, which leads to this really sick moment where Barret literally chucks Red at the enemy. And then there's Divine Punishment, which has Aerith and Tifa team up, with Aerith creating a giant dome of magic and Tifa bouncing off the inside of it, ricocheting into the enemy again and again. It's so freaking cool. These dual tech synergy moves feel like the ones from Chrono Trigger, but like on crack. They're so flashy and add so much more variety to how you handle each fight. I can't wait to see like what other combinations are in the game, because what's actually shown here in the demo, they only allow you to have a specific setup of teams. So not every combination is actually possible or actually visible in this demo, but they do clarify that in the full version of the game, you'll be able to mix and match party members however you wish. Another new mechanic that's shown off in both the demos is actually a universal parry mechanic. And I'm not referring to the parry as in the dodge parry from the materia, or the parry as in Cloud's hitting triangle in his Punisher mode at just the right time. It actually occurs when you block the enemy's attack at just the right moment, causing the game to suddenly slow down and giving you an opening to then counterattack. And apparently everyone in the game can do this, even characters that are generally not really meant for melee combat like Aerith or Barret. And it looks fun. Oh my god. I think this is a really smart way to add an additional like execution-based level to the game's combat. It was something that was all over the place in Final Fantasy XVI, where that game was much more actually about execution-based action than it was about the RPG-like stat-based mechanics of the previous Final Fantasy games. But I kind of like what they're doing here, where they have a kind of a bit of both worlds, where they have the RPG mechanics, but also the execution bits. Because again, that just leads to more variance and allows players to play the game their own way, and clutch moments where you feel like you pulled off the parry at just the right time. Now, I will say, in terms of your party members, most of your party actually plays pretty identically to how they were in FF7 Remake. Tifa is still the insane powerhouse that builds the stagger percentage with her triangle moves, and Barret is still the tanky range guy. Funny enough though, Aerith is actually quite a bit different though in this game. Her Tempest move that was originally on the triangle skill has actually been moved to her square skill, meaning that instead of using triangle to charge up and unleash this multi-hitting move, she just has to hold square to do it. With her triangle move instead being a warp ability that allows her to instantly travel between a number of wars that she's laid on the battlefield, which is kind of cool. because she's all about trying to sort of stay out of action and shoot people from a distance with her magic. Red 13 is also playable in this, and interestingly enough, he's actually more about guarding and perfect parrying moves in order to build his vengeance gauge, which when he unleashes it, grants him extra power and dodge speed, depending on how much is filled up when he uses it, which is interesting. I'm actually kind of surprised it's specifically guarding against attacks. I almost thought it would be something like he'd get a perfect dodge, because he always sort of came across as kind of a zippy character. But I'd say that this new perfect parry system that's in the game is probably benefited the most by Red. He seems to be built around that mechanic entirely. We did also get some new moves for everybody across the board, like Cloud getting a move called Fireball Blade, which basically launches his ass in the air and hit the enemy with a fire and lightning based move. Bear gets a new move called Bonus Round, where he seems to load his weapon with unique bullets. And Tifa gets a move called Reverse Skill, which is a wind-based move. So it's interesting to see that the characters are actually getting specific elemental moves. I didn't actually see either Tifa or Barrett use it in this gameplay footage, but I did see it in the menus when they were scrolling through it and showing off some of their moves. We also have new different types of materia, including a really interesting materia where essentially 2 different spells are actually made available through just one materia, which wasn't really the case in any of the previous games, even the original Final Fantasy VII, aside from a very few select like end game materia. Materia like Fire and Ice, which allows you to have both Fire and Ice, and even the leveled up versions, eventually Blizzara and Fira, and then Blizzaga and Faraga when they're like fully maxed out. Or Empowerment materia that gives you some new moves like Bravery and Faith, which temporarily increase your statistics. Also, some returning materia. We see Morph come back, which was in the original game a move that allowed you to turn enemies into items, and you can do that again here as their HP gets lower. The Spare Change ability, where you can literally spend money to do damage to the enemy. And also new purple materia that essentially allows you to auto attack with your non-controlling party members with their unique and weapon abilities, which is generally not something that the AI does in the game. Usually whenever you're not controlling a character, your other party members will just attack. So by doing this, this will actually allow them to do their other moves without you having to control them, which is interesting. I don't know how smart they're going to be about using it, but I guess if you're sort of more into controlling just one character, it might be nice to just have your characters do stuff and you not have to worry about it. Speaking of your non-active party, the party members that actually aren't even in your party, that are like essentially not part of your 3-man party, can be seen outside the fight still attacking the enemies in your current fight. So they do contribute in some way. You just have no way of actually being able to control them or tell them what to do. I think they just kind of shoot and attack from a distance. We also see the return of weapon moves, which are the moves that you learn from your specific weapons, and the proficiency bonus that you get, which helps you to learn those skills faster by completing certain objectives. That again was all in the original remake. That seems to be returning again. I did also notice a very interesting change though, and a balance change in this, where Aga moves have seemingly been nerfed pretty hard, because now instead of costing 1 ATB like they used to alongside their weaker counterparts, they actually cost now 2 ATB. This is honestly likely done to help curb the insane endgame blowout that came from using the Aga moves. Like, you truly could just nuke the fuck out of like some of the bosses and endgame bosses of the last game with the Aga moves. Because it built up so much stagger and did so much magic damage to the enemy that it kind of made a lot of the fights a bit of a cakewalk at the end. So now you'll have to think a bit more about using your Aga moves, and you're not going to be necessarily casting them back to back unless you use like Aerith's, double cast move. But the original, we were able to essentially, if you had the double cast plus the Aga moves, you were able to cast like an Aga move like 4 times in a row. It was kind of busted. But yeah, I also noticed some really interesting gimmicks going on with both the bosses we saw. With the Materia Keeper, he got up on the ceiling to sort of get away from you, which really didn't matter for Sephiroth because he just teleports up there. And a moment where he would essentially cast his move Trine on you if you weren't able to attack fast enough, or hit him with your synergy ability. And then the water monster did his classic water ball move, which was in the original Final Fantasy VII, which first you have to attack the water ball that's been cast on your party member in order to get it off them, which is really neat. Again, these gimmicks and stuff were done in the bosses in 7 Remake, and it was what made those fights so fun and engaging and just so enjoyable to go back and replay too. Every fight was different. But yeah, I think that's like the general big changes that have happened to the battle system that I've been able to sort of glean from this little bit. So with that, I want to move on to the exploration, which actually has me even more excited than a lot of the battle stuff, which is also very good. And the thing that I noticed that was probably the biggest thing, the absolute biggest thing that came out of this exploration stuff was your ability to scale terrain, which may not sound like much, but comparing it to how it was in 7 Remake, where everything was essentially just like a hallway and there were kind of like invisible barriers and things stopping you from necessarily, you know, like hopping this railing over here to go down the stairs in this small section. I mean, you could hop railings, but it was only in like specific sections. You couldn't do it when there was like an incline right behind it, or if you're just like a little too high, or oh, there's like a slightly high step that, you know, you have to sort of walk around and go up the incline of it. This time you just have the ability to press a button to scale varying levels of cliff sides. And the system seems to be very flexible. While it's noticeable when you're controlling Cloud in the intro section, it becomes even more noticeable when you're controlling him in the open world, and you're able to just sort of hop up and down random cliff sides, both on and off your chocobo. Now, it's not to say there aren't completely no invisible walls. There still were a few that were noticeable. It's not like you can just jump off a cliff whenever you want, and you also can't seemingly just jump in place like you can in, for example, like a Xenoblade game. But it still does allow for a much wider range of movement than you ever could in the previous games. However, that's not all. Not only can you scale terrain, you can also swim in water. Holy mother of fuck! Sorry, this may not seem like much to some people, but this is truly a massive deal. Square is kind of notorious for having some pretty not so great map design, especially when they have attempted open worlds or wide linear worlds in their previous games, a la Final Fantasy 15 or Final Fantasy 16. The world ends up just feeling kind of empty and sort of lifeless. And you find that a lot of the areas that seem like you should be able to walk around or hop up are just immovable. You have to go take like a long way, or like this knee-high wall is just too much for fucking Clive to handle with his absolutely god-awful shitty jump. Fuck! God damn it, Clive, come on! It's not that high! So to now be able to climb down a cliff and then hop into the water to then swim to an island where you can then grab a bunch of extra gear and treasure is amazing. That is so freaking Xenoblade. I can't believe it, dude. And it's what I wanted to see in this game, and I genuinely wasn't sure we were going to get it. I really wasn't. Especially after what we saw in FF16, which I'm not gonna say was awful, but it wasn't great. The exploration of that game was pretty not good, even though Clive did in fact actually have a jump button. It basically did him no good at all. Though I will say, you can't actually seemingly swim too far in this, and that sort of makes sense because you probably won't be able to swim out into farther water without like a boat or something, as has been mentioned in interviews with the devs. Though part of me was almost wishing that it did like a Jack and Daxter like death thing, where if you just went out too far into deep water, a giant fish would come up and eat you. But that'd probably be a little too goofy. Speaking of, people were actually limited to where they could go in this demo as well. This little section of Junin was sort of self-contained, even though there were some clearly open areas that you would normally be able to go to, but those will have to be saved for the full version of the game. But yes, in the Junin section, you were given a chocobo, specifically a mountain chocobo that you could use to ride around the world. And as been mentioned in previous material, you will be getting different types of chocobos based on the areas that you're in that will allow you to traverse the terrain in different ways. Like the mountain chocobo seems to be good at climbing walls, while the sky chocobo that we'll get at a later point will allow you to actually glide across the map, which is pretty amazing. They do seem to be in specific places that allow you to actually like ascend it. Like there are marks in the walls, so I think similarly marks in places where you'd be able to glide, but it's still pretty cool. So maybe I wouldn't say it's completely like open-ended, like I literally could just take this bird and like clip out of bounds, but it does allow for a pretty expanded level of freedom. I also will say I'm very happy the bird seems to be running way faster than the chocobos from Final Fantasy 16. And not only that, but they can also sniff out treasure, which they dig up with their little talons and bring out interesting new and rare materials. You also uncover little baby chocobos that will guide you to rest spots and secrets, where you can, I assume that these are like essentially waypoints maybe, but you also gain golden plumes by helping them, which you can then use to exchange for gear for your chocobo at chocobo ranches. Now this gear is apparently tied to not just their aesthetics, but also to chocobo races that we will be able to do with the golden saucer, according to the devs. Like it's gonna affect their stats in some way. We don't really know much about that, but we do know that you can apparently color customize all of your gear in any way you want. It's crazy. It gives you a literal like color wheel, which means if I want to make my chocobo look like a Ninja Turtle or something, I freaking can, and that is wonderful. You might also notice while running around the world, the game has items just kind of strewn about. And these are actually raw materials because this game has a crafting system. And before you go, oh God, it's not like FF16, is it? Jesus Christ. No more crafting. No. No, it actually looks pretty good. You essentially have a to-do list of items to make. Then as you craft items for the first time, you will actually earn experience, which will then level up your craftsmanship and allow you to craft even more items. And these items can include things like potions, ethers, elixirs, as well as seat cushions, funny enough, which basically act as the game's tents. Seat cushions can be used at benches around the world to make them, I guess, comfy enough for you to be able to sit on and recover your HP and MP. And the game's even nice about informing you when you have enough items to craft on the to-do list. As you're running around the world, it will just give you like a little notification. While running around the world, you can actually see these icons marked on the map and compass called fiend sightings that act as intel for this weird device called Mai. It seems to be some kind of device that Cloud holds when you start getting close to these things that actually point you in the direction and even talks to you about like the local wildlife and gives you a description about each of the monsters, which seems pretty cool, though it does seem like she talks quite a bit. On the bright side, it doesn't seem like she does it for every fight. She just does it for one specifically marked with these fiend sightings. When you get into one of these fights, Mai provides you with objectives to do, like staggering an enemy or defeating in a time limit. And by doing so, you seemingly gather data that it can, I guess, be spent on something. We don't really see a use or a way to actually spend or see what that actually leads to, but it does unlock some like additional things as the game keeps track of what objectives you completed. Hell, you can actually even go back and retry these fights whenever you want. All you have to do is hold down the triangle button in the sections where you had these fights. I think the fights themselves are meant to be like stronger versions of regular enemies, I think, or like unique forms of them. But yeah, this whole Mai thing and the way it's sort of set up really remind me of Chadley. And it seems that she is connected in some way with Chadley, yes, because she does at one point mention him at the end of one of these segments.
What fascinating data this is. I'm certain Chadley will be over the moon.
Clearly that little dork is back and ready to use us as his fucking guinea pigs again. But yeah, these Mai battles give me a few different vibes. One, Mai almost sounds like a Pokédex, the way she describes all of the monsters that you fight. She goes into like insane detail.
During this time of year, Tonadus migrate to the Junon region to seek out mates.
It's cute, though I do also feel like, while it isn't something that happens in every fight, I kind of feel like I hope that the game gives you the option to turn her off, because I feel like she could potentially get a little annoying. She talks quite a bit. But another thing that this also makes me think of, this stuff that you're encountering in the world, which, by the way, the devs also clarified, even in the demo, that what we're seeing in this little section is actually going to be filled out even more. We're actually gonna have even more stuff to do in just this little area than we're getting in this demo. But it actually makes me think a lot of Xenoblade 3, specifically Future Redeemed, and how they essentially gamified so much, like every mechanic in the game. And what I mean is they took all of the collecting and the Collectopedia stuff and the unlocking of stuff all around the world and finding items and fighting even regular basic monsters and made them into things that you accomplished and checked off a list. And then used those things that you got to make your party even stronger. It was such a brilliant system, and I feel like I'm seeing it here in some way in FF7 Rebirth, and I freaking love it. This is the kind of stuff that makes people just want to go out and look around the world because they want to find new and interesting things. It's also a part of what made the OG Final Fantasy VII so great, was being able to run around and find these secret caves and nooks and crannies where you can come across these crazy weird quests. And while to some extent these little monster encounters can be seen almost like just extra bounties, the fact that they seem to be unlocking a currency and building towards something gives me hope that this is going to be a very long, epic side quest that will give us a lot of new mechanics and things to experiment with. The devs have also mentioned something that also wasn't available in this demo, where things like synergy skills and abilities can actually be upgraded or changed using some kind of skill tree that's in the game. So, but yeah, that's sort of the general gist of the exploration that was seen from the Junon section. Honestly, there were a lot of little things that were pretty easy to miss. A lot of people didn't even realize you could actually swim. And while it didn't occur in this footage, apparently you also can do things like pet your chocobos and play with them to some extent. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some other cool, neat little secrets that weren't even discovered in this little playthrough here. So before I wrap things up, I do want to point out a few other kind of small, just side things that I noticed while gleaning through this material. One thing I have to say that I absolutely love is the new UI for the main menu. It's so much sleeker and more interesting looking than the one we got in the original FF7 remake. All of the items and materials now have actually 3D models, and they're not just like a 2D image. And the fact that you can see your party members like in real time standing there, seeing how their equipment changes on their body, and maybe even see them in new outfits. I mean, we saw that, Cloud was wearing a new outfit in Costa del Sol, so maybe we'll get new outfits for all your party members. I don't know, it's just a really sleek looking menu that I'm glad to see just wasn't like a carbon copy of the original. I will say I also noticed that there was quite a bit of reused music from Final Fantasy VII Remake, like when we were exploring Mount Nebel, as well as the beginning part of the fight with the Materia Keeper. That was just like the regular battle theme, which isn't meant to be a critique. I mean, the music of 7 Remake is fantastic, so it makes sense that they would reuse some of that again. I'd actually been wondering if they'd planned to do a brand new like battle theme that essentially acted as the new one as opposed to the classic, dun 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 da 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 da. But there also were quite a few new themes, including the one where you're exploring and battling in Junin. And that did actually have different music from the standard battle theme. So I think the music we're going to get in this game will probably be a bit of a mixed bit. Not completely all brand new songs, but some reused ones, as well as some brand new ones, which I think is good. I really don't think they need to honestly make like a brand new soundtrack from scratch every time. That just seems unnecessary. Another also small detail that I liked was actually the fact that you could see just like regular, like smaller, non-aggressive animals like rabbits and deer running around the environment in some spots, which helps to make the world feel more lived in and not just like, hey, everything's a monster if you're not a human. I also appreciated the small detail in the flashback where Sephiroth was a higher level than Cloud, because Cloud was clearly considered the newbie here. Sephiroth wasn't level 50 like he was in the original game, but still pretty high up there. Funny enough, in the original game, Cloud was level 1, but they actually made him much stronger here, which actually makes more sense than it did in the original game. I feel like that was a bit of an oversight on the devs' part. Like, it really didn't make sense for Cloud to be like level 1 in the OG game, where he just sort of got his shit kicked in all the time, because he was supposed to be a first-class soldier. So to me, this seems more like them fixing a weird continuity issue from the original. I liked the moment when the team arrives in Junin Harbor and they run into Rhonda, who notices that they're all on the wanted list. And I thought it was funny how excited Aerith got when she learned she had the highest bounty of the group.
And Aerith to boot, huh? That's another $500,000 on top.
$500,000?
I also have a prediction, by the way, that the CPR minigame from the original Final Fantasy VII is going to return in this game, but it's not going to be with Priscilla, because seemingly Priscilla was not attacked by the water monster like in the original. It was Yuffie. So I think instead, Cloud's going to give CPR, or attempt to give CPR to Yuffie, which is probably going to lead to some funny shenanigans. And if they do, I think that's great. That's definitely way better and less creepy than it was in the original game. That was always kind of an awkward moment in that game. And finally, probably the funniest and best thing about this demo, Red can be seen riding a chocobo, and it's fucking beautiful. Look how happy he is. But yeah, guys, there you have it. These were my extended thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth demos and all of the subsequent material that sort of came out of this TGS. And all I have to say is, after everything I've seen, I am now so much more excited about this game than I even was before learning about this. My biggest worries really were in regards to the game's exploration, because as much as 7 Remake was a fun game, it had its problems. There was a lot of corridors, a lot of kind of super basic map design that sort of were similar to early PS1, PS2 games that I really didn't want to see them use again when they moved out to the more open, big world map sections. And I'm just happy to see that they seemingly are learning from that, and not just from their previous experiences, but clearly from other games. One of the head devs even said how much they loved and enjoyed and were influenced by games like Horizon Zero Dawn. I can't also help but think that Elden Ring and other games that really elevated and perfected the open world genre did also have an impact on how they decided to design their world here. So I'm really liking what I see. I cannot wait to finally actually get a chance to play this myself. I really hope that this demo, these 2 demos, make their way into the public at some point. I don't know, maybe that's something that happened around the Game Awards or something. But I really do hope that the public actually gets a chance to experience this themselves, because it just looks like so much freaking fun. I'm positive, though, at some point we will get a demo of some kind, just because that is what happened with Final Fantasy VII Remake, where we got to play through the reactor section. And while I skipped that originally back when I played it, I don't know if I can do that again this time, all right? I'm too excited for this game. I don't think I can wait. If a demo comes out, I'm probably gonna check it out before my official Let's Play drops at the end of February, so. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope you all enjoyed deep diving into some of the fun stuff that we could possibly expect in FF7 Rebirth. If you're as excited as I am, or at least got some enjoyment or learned something from this video, please do leave a like and a favorite. It really does help me out. And hey, if you're not already, why not subscribe to become a Picky Penguin aboard the SSLP, where the days are always sunny and the vids are always funny. And hey, you'll get a notification when I do finally get around to checking out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth when it comes out early next year. Not to mention Persona 3 Reload, which is also, funny enough, happening, I think, just like in the same month as FF7 Rebirth. Holy crap, that is gonna be a busy year, bro. It's gonna be some long Let's Plays and some big fat ass RPGs. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, Picky Penguins, till next time, guys, stay classy.